Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Utopia Season 1, Episode 8. It is called Stay Alive, Jessica Hyde. So, full spoilers for the episode as always, and apologies it's taken me a little bit longer to get to this final episode. I actually watched it as quickly as I was going through them, but I had to keep pushing the recording back. So I watched it again because it had been a couple of weeks so that I could talk about it properly. So yeah, we had the last episode end with what seemed to be Christie and turned out to be the case in this episode, wrapped in duct tape and delivered by Arby to the main group. And this episode kind of splits into two halves. The first half is very much the group with Christie in Stearns' house, just figuring things out and letting Christie monologue for the most part. I mean, occasionally a little bit of violence and some finger chopping off, but for the most part, it's him monologuing and kind of getting to the truth of what this vaccine has got in it. Because up until now, of course, it's been very much theorized about, that it's going to kill people, it's going to do this, it's going to be doing that. And we also discover that Becca's disease is was also him. That disease, when she was a kid and she was given something for a cough in school, Becky got this disease from something that he'd created. But that was, as he puts it, when they were thinking small. And what we find out is that the vaccine, which everyone is not only taking willingly but is demanding it, as he points out, there's a lot of talk from him about the kind of the like plain Americans like entitlement against them and things like that. But we find out that it is going to sterilize people and essentially pause childbirth for a few generations, 3 generations specifically. I'm not sure how exactly he expects to start it back up again, but I'm sure that may be something that comes up, or maybe it's not worth thinking about. But so, a lot of what he's been saying all season, this, what have you done today to earn your place in this crowded world? So he's actively been talking about the world being too crowded. And this idea that he believes he's saving the world, that he is curing the world of its biggest problem, and that is us. Too many human beings. And there's some interesting points brought out, I think, during this conversation. One is that, yeah, the Earth can live with 10 billion people on it, but we'd all have to live very modestly and selfishly. And let's be honest, it's hard to disagree with him when he says we're not very good at it. But, 5 billion or less, then, we can live kind of extravagantly and be kind of selfish and have the standard of living that we've all come to expect in first world countries and so on. So he's basically, okay, well, if that's the option that's going to work, that's what we're going to do. And has made these choices to do it. Apart from all this obviously great, like, exposition and the info dump of what's actually going on here, and it's mostly pretty compelling stuff as it's being told. And I think part of the reason why it's mostly compelling, I mean, John Cusack's not bad. I do think he's maybe a little over the top at moments during this. I mean, the whole show, to be honest, but in this section particularly, it does feel like he's sort of hamming up a little bit. But what does make it work is all of the other characters. It's all the other characters reacting to various moments. It's some simple little things to, like, Christie asking who killed the wife, who he notices is dead, and Alice kind of steps forward and he says something about, violence is on the rise with girls or something like that, and he asks her name. And the moments that really felt like raw from an acting perspective here is when Becky like sort of interrupts him and says, "Don't you talk to her," and then he keeps talking for like a minute, and then Jessica comes in and grabs him and says, "No, she said do not talk to her." And even that little moment there, the idea that Jessica's backing up something that Becky has just said, kind of like further progresses her kind of bonding with the group, and the trust that we sort of saw a bit of with Becky specifically back at the vending machine stuff from last episode. So those little moments are really good and they feel very raw, such as Wilson, this also here and also later when he's trying to get him to make the confession video and he says, "You murdered my father, you slaughtered my family." These moments and having these characters confront him for what he's done directly, even though he's still clearly devout and fundamentally believes in what he's doing, he shows no remorse for any of the things he's done. He does say that he, has done awful things, that he's killed lots of children, and he likes children, he prefers them to adults, but this is the price that the world moving on. So it's very it's very Watchmen kind of, kill X number of percent for the betterment of everyone else. Here specifically, of course, it's kill X number, or not even kill, is because that's the kind of the thing he points out, is that the solution they came up with doesn't even involve really killing anyone. They've had to kill people along the way, obviously, and covering up the conspiracy, but the actual solution is just stopping people from having more kids. Uh, which obviously the point is raised, but you're taking away people's choice, you're taking away this and that. This is definitely something that we've seen in other science fiction here or there. In fact, me and Tara, if you don't know, I do a sci-fi movie podcast called the Atomic Cinema Experiment with Tara, and one of the movies we did back in the first 70s month that we did a film called ZPG, which was kind of about this. It was called Zero Population Growth. Actually, my acronym might be a little off. I might not remember exactly what it stood for, but it was something along those lines. And it was all about how childbirth had been outlawed for 30 years, and it's about these parents and wanting to have a kid and then kind of doing it illegally, and very very interesting little. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but there's definitely some interesting stuff in there if you like sort of like quaint, gritty 70s sci-fi. But I was thinking of that as this was all coming up, and it does kind of track with a lot of the sort of things that Christie's been saying all season. So this felt kind of true to what we've been building to. And I also, of course, love that as this is going on, Thomas has sent in a squad of hitmen to try and get his father back. And we just every so often we'll cut to the outside of the house, and Arby is just taking out these hitmen left and right. And, he gets hit at one point in the arm, but he does quite well. And of course, it all kind of, because I love that it keeps happening. He's racking up these kills, and then eventually Jessica looks outside the window and just notices him dragging a dead body, and Arby just sort of casually stops and waves at him, to which she, of course, waves back. I mean, that's a delightful little moment, which kind of sums up their odd relationship after the last couple of episodes. I have to say, though, so the first half of the episode is pretty much excellent. I mean, maybe it's a strong word, but excellent for the standard of the show, right? It's a really good first half of the episode. I think the back half of the episode is where we maybe get into some critiques and some things that don't sit super snugly. I wouldn't say it won't sit well, but don't sit super snugly. I'm very conflicted upon the end of the season and the cliffhangers that it gives me. Some of them feel like we really want to have, we have to have some sort of big dramatic element in every single plot thread so that we have as many things to make us want to come back for season 2 as possible. And I don't think all of them are actually needed. It kind of does this thing where there's, and I get having cliffhangers. I did not expect this to be the end of the story. I did not expect this to have a happy ending by any means. But it is kind of odd to me that every single plot thread ends in a really bad place. None of them. There's not one sort of uplifting thing. There's an uplifting moment. Don't get me wrong. There's an uplifting moment when they're at the lab, but every single plot thread ends in just kind of either something really depressing, something where it kind of makes us question our loyalty or trust in a character, and then the ultimate ending, the final kind of sequence, the reveal and the twist and the stuff with Jessica at home, I thought was very underwhelming, honestly. Because Jessica doesn't go with them, because their plan is, of course, to destroy the vaccine. And they cut off Christie's finger for it. Really funny moment. Good stuff. But Jessica doesn't go with them. Wilson stays back with Christie. Wilson's going to make him record a confession video. The idea that he's going to end this conspiracy with a conspiracy theory. And he gets, he looks like a bit of a smirk in his face. I will say, one of the things that sticks out to me with Wilson here, so if we're talking about him pure first, is that he does seem to be kind of agreeing with a lot of the things Christie's saying to the group. I mean, he obviously still very much against them, and this is before we even get to the confession video where he's repeatedly saying, "You murdered my family," and he's ready to shoot him in the face. But it is notable to me, especially, and this is maybe the benefit of having watched it twice, is that when I was watching these earlier scenes with Christie kind of sort of poking at why he was doing what he was doing, it was Wilson who kept kind of finishing the thoughts. He kept sort of realizing, oh, that means there's going to be wars over water, and that means that all the poor are going to die first. And he starts to sort of essentially see what Christie's saying, and sort of at the very least agrees with all these things that are probably going to happen if nothing is done to intervene. So I appreciated that on a second viewing, because I have to say on the first viewing, the ending with Wilson, where we kind of leave the attempted conspiracy like confession video ambiguously, and then return to him where he tricks Becky into the car and he has let Christy go. He seems to be working or agreed to work with Christy in some capacity. That really sat with me oddly. I didn't like it, and not just in a sort of, oh no, the character I like is, turned bad. It wasn't like that. I wasn't disappointed with him in that way. I was more just very ambivalent to the plot direction, where I kind of felt that it wasn't. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, admittedly, there was a little bit more on a repeat viewing of this episode where he is kind of like taking in what Christie's saying in the first half, so maybe he does believe that some of this has to happen. And the way he says okay to Becky, it's okay, kind of implies that he still thinks he's on her side and he still believes that what he's doing is right, even if he's making a deal with the devil to do it, or he's been brainwashed by him, or whatever. But it did, this is one of the ones where I kind of felt like, okay, we have to have every thread ending on some sort of like sad thing. Obviously, Grant's been arrested as well. That's a whole thing. Ian and Alice are just kind of on the run, but there's the fun stuff to be had before that, where they go to the lab. And I actually was thinking before they got there, like, but isn't this going to be like thousands and thousands of boxes of vaccines? Like, how like five of you going to do this? And it does play with the comedy of that, where they walk in, sort of, they've underestimated like how much of this vaccine there is. And I did get a good chuckle out of Ian going up with just a golf club and just starting to hit boxes. And it was like, this is going to take forever. And I appreciated that, because it felt like it naturally escalated throughout the scene, where we go from that to these other things, and then eventually, of course, the forklifts, and we get the fun montage of the kids, and then eventually Stern's all hitting everything, and that beautiful final moment where they're all domoing down, dominoing, you know what I mean? The domino effect, where all the shelves are just stacking into each other as Becky and Ian kiss after he gives her the ring, and it's a really sweet moment. It's very cinematic and like grandiose in Hollywood, but I'm okay with that if the moment lands, and I think it did for me here. I like these two characters enough that I'm into them having their cheesy moment here. It's one of the happiest things in the whole episode, honestly. Stearns goes off to get the egg, and the big reveal with him at the end, and this also kind of was like, okay, we have to do something with him that's ambiguous too, which is he didn't destroy it. He was supposed to destroy the egg, but instead he kept the egg that has the original virus for the vaccine in it. Now, again, I have to assume that he's got noble intentions, that he's doing this for a good reason. He thinks he's doing this for some. It's just one of these things, though, where it was going through these moments where I think this came either right before or right after the Wilson reveal, and I was just kind of like, wait, we're doing this with two characters, where I'm like, do we trust them now? I don't know. I felt like having both of them really hurt each other. Like, if it was just one of them, fine. Having it be both of them is kind of a bit iffy for me. But anyway, there's some comedy there. I will just one minor weird nitpick, which is not a big deal really. I can let it go, but I thought it was kind of weird how there was only seemingly one big entrance to this warehouse with all the vaccines, except that it actually confirmed by the end of the scene that there wasn't, but there was more entrances, because I was thinking, like, surely this also connects to the building. Surely there's also like a couple of doors or stairways into the main lab from here. But for some reason, the team of security guards and their truck that are trying to, like, ram their way into the building are using the big shutter door. Like, why is no one going into the other areas? I mean, maybe it's as simple as the security guards don't have clearance to walk around like through all those doors, but you would think they would call someone higher up, and there'd be some sort of like protocol in place for letting them in or something. It was a little bit weird. I mean, it worked for the comedy of it, but it was a little contrived. It just, especially since at the end of the scene, Stearns legitimately just goes through a door to another part of the building. He uses the finger, of course, Christie's for the fingerprint scanner, but I don't know. I was a bit weird in that sense. But like I say, back to Jessica stuff, because Jessica stuff, I think, is the stuff that I feel the most like just kind of like, I don't know, whatever about. Arby takes her home and she's getting sicker. He says stay alive, Jessica Hyde. He says it again at the end, of course. And we've kind of had this idea that she's been kind of an incubator, a test subject for all these viruses, and we see that, of course, when we see her back later. She has all these different like marks and bruises and symbols on her back, sort of suggesting she's like literally holding all this. She's essentially the human egg for tons of experimental things. But so the Homeland Security lady turns out to be part of Home, and she does say that she's not working with Christie anymore, but Christie doesn't know that. But she's still clearly, I mean, I don't know if I should say evil per se, but she comes off pretty evil. Does not seem to be an ally. Jessica just kind of like goes to sleep in her old bed in the little yellow house. And I was sort of thinking about this, like, is Arby like, did Arby do this? Was he supposed to always do this, and therefore he's not really turning good? Because I was kind of hoping that he was turning good, and I suppose you could say he wasn't supposed to do this from the perspective of Christie and his side of things, but he was supposed to do it in the sense that Jessica's father put it in the comic, and he was kind of encouraging this to happen because Homeland Lady, for lack of a better name, wanted her to come home. Like this was, she says that to Jessica. This was about your coming home. This was your hero's journey. And the final reveal being, of course, that Jessica's father is literally in the basement of the house drawing more comics. We don't see his face. They've probably not cast the actor yet. Assuming we get a season 2, they'll cast someone and that'll be a thing. I felt the whole thing just came off a little bit weird. They were going for kind of this dreamlike quality, but it was kind of odd that Jessica just kind of. And I guess it's supposed to emulate that she's feeling weaker, that she's not got the fight in her anymore, and she just lies down, and she doesn't really put up much of a fight with Homeland Lady. She just kind of like ends up in bed, and when it's revealed that it's her father downstairs, they do this flashy little editing technique where it cuts to her face and her eyes open as the music kicks in and the credits play, and it's like, okay, it's got some energy that they want us to feel pumped up for potential season 2. But I have to admit, the whole thing about going back to the house, the father just being the under the house drawing more comics, and it does that thing as well where when Jessica realizes Homeland Lady is part of Home, and she's not who she said she was, she immediately throws Utopia through the bars in the window because the windows have bars on them, and they flutter away, and all the kids outside that are part of Home, including Lily, who's there with Arby/John. Like, they all just start, like, sort of picking them up and throwing them around and playing with them. And Homeland Lady's just like, I don't want Utopia. Utopia had a purpose and it served it. You're here. Homeland, Utopia was just a decoy. It was it does that thing where it's like, yeah, that thing that the entire show's been revolving around, it wasn't as important as you thought it was. And that's a little frustrating. It's one of those tropes that happen every so often in movies and TV shows where we get to the end and the MacGuffin that we've been revolving around isn't a big deal the whole time. And well, it is technically just a MacGuffin, right? It could literally be anything, and we shouldn't maybe care too much about it. But the characters did care about it in a way that wasn't just because it was a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin's how we look at it as a story device. The characters should care about it, and they've been taking this as super important. And I can only assume that we're going to have new pages of the comic from her father next season that'll give them an idea of where to go next. But I did find a lot of this back half of the episode to be a lot more about, let's just have some cliffhangers for season 2, as opposed to actually feeling like any kind of proper conclusion to season 1. And again, it's okay to have cliffhangers. The problem is that it doesn't really have a resolution that feels like this was a season. Like this season is on its own was some kind of chapter with a resolution. And that's something that streaming shows suffer from episode to episode. And I actually think the episodes in this show have done a good job of not having that problem. But the season as a whole feels like it doesn't really have much of an ending. I don't feel like plot arcs wrapped up for people for the most part. It feels like it's just teasing more things. So I am a little underwhelmed with the finale, I have to say, which is a shame because I have enjoyed the show mostly. It has its humor, and there's obviously elements of that. I love most of the stuff with Christie in the house at the start for the first 20 minutes. Most of the stuff at the lab, even though there's some really weird little nitpicky plot holes with it, is mostly fun. But the last 15 minutes didn't have a whole lot for me. We should mention that Homeland Lady says that her blood is slowly saving her, so she'll, it's maybe something her body goes through. It's like a cycle, and her blood will. In fact, yeah, because she got infected, right? She got bit by the rabbit. So I think the idea is that she's getting sick from the virus, of course, but her body has because it's already held all these diseases, or she's like genetically modified to like hold all these diseases safely. Her system just has to work through the process of getting rid of it. Yeah. That was a weird way to get to that point, but yes, that's yeah. I mean that makes sense, and I'm okay. I'm okay with that part. That specific part that her body's kind of like able to withstand this, and it's okay that she got bit because she's had all these viruses already. They all kind of come from her in a weird way. That's actually, I think, the interesting part from a mechanical point of view, and I'm excited to see more of that. And I think that's a cool idea going forward. A lot of the characters, Homeland Lady, her father, I'm not super excited about. So we'll see what season 2 does with them, though. It's entirely possible a lot of this won't be a big deal. But yeah, so probably one of the weaker episodes, unfortunately, overall. It just felt a little unfulfilling in a lot of ways. I left it kind of shrugging my shoulders a little bit, but definitely could have been worse. And I think there was enough interesting stuff in this season. I would definitely be down for season 2, though. I'll happily give season 2 a try if it indeed gets renewed and we do get a second season. The subject matter in 2020, get it to 2021, might be a bit of a hurdle for it getting renewed, as I've mentioned before, but we'll have to wait and see. But there you go, that is episode 8. That's the finale of Utopia season 1. And I suspect that now that I finish the season, people will be asking me to go back and look at the original show. It's hard to want to, though, because I know it doesn't have an ending, because the original show got cancelled. It's really hard to convince me to go back and watch that. Then again, this might not get any more either, so the original show has more than this. So maybe that's an argument. I don't know. That has been the finale of Utopia. Thank you very much. Get us on Patreon at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support all the content and give us as little as $1 per month. And $1 is super cool. It's more than we would make if you watched every single video on the channel every month. That said, though, if you can't give money, that is okay too. You can absolutely hit the like button. That helps us out a bunch. YouTube will share us out more. We'll show up in better places in the algorithm, the almighty YouTube algorithm that dictates how successful any channel is, which is really hard to break into if you don't have to hit those big thresholds of millions of people and all that. So that is a super help. But otherwise, that is it. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?